But get this, we are also reporting today that a group of CEOs of the top American retailers, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, and Lowe's, had a private meeting with Trump on Monday. They had plenty to say, but there was one warning that stuck out. Empty shelves, they said. Empty shelves in American stores as soon as this summer because of Trump's actions.
It is that meeting in the Oval Office on Monday that we learned about, and other reporters did as well, that really apparently caught the president's attention. And I am told that business leaders, the Business Roundtable and others have been reaching out to White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles and other advisors here, trying to get a meeting with the president, trying to convey to him in real terms the real fallout of some of this uncertainty, some of these tariff policies. And it was that empty shelves comment, we are told, that really caught the president's attention. Of course, you can see why.
While the markets are reacting to yesterday's comments from President Trump and members of his administration, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told investors in a closed-door meeting the president's trade war with China is, quote, not sustainable. According to a person in the room, Bessent said he expects there will be a de-escalation in the very near future, but acknowledged negotiating with China is likely to be a slog. Later in the day, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt echoed the Treasury Secretary's optimism, adding the administration was setting the stage for a deal, although neither official suggested those negotiations actually have even begun. President Trump was asked about trade talks yesterday at the White House.
I'm not going to say, oh, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice. They're going to be very nice. And we'll see what happens. But ultimately, they have to make a deal. 145% is very high, and it won't be that high.
So we're hearing that the CEOs of Walmart, Target, and Home Depot are meeting with Trump, and they've let him know that his tariff policies are just extremely destructive. Trump doesn't care about that, but they're saying it's going to lead to empty shelves in these stores that everybody shops at. Now, Walmart employs people that they don't pay a living wage. You know, they have to be on food stamps. So this is pretty interesting. The CEOs of these companies are not good people. Trump is not good people. So they have limited arguments to debate with each other, because if you just talk about what's the right thing to do and what's going to help people, none of them care. So stay tuned and see how they resolve this issue.
What if I told you the biggest names in American retail just sounded the alarm directly to the President of the United States? Walmart, Target, Home Depot. They didn't go public. They went private, straight to Trump. And what they revealed could signal mass layoffs and chaos in the U.S. retail economy.
Executives from some of the country's biggest retailers, Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, meeting with the president this afternoon about tariffs. For the very latest out of Washington, let's get to Megan Casella at the White House. Megan.
Hey, Mel, that's absolutely right. The CEOs of all three of those companies here this afternoon to meet with the president, and I am told that tariffs were on the agenda. Just in the last couple of minutes, I got this readout from the president via a White House official, the president saying that it was a good meeting with the biggest retailers in the world, confirming that the discussion included tariffs. The president also says the meeting went very well and that it was an honor to have them in the Oval Office this afternoon. Now, all three companies, I should say, also put out statements as well, mostly calling it a productive and a constructive meeting. And Target specifically also said that they discussed, quote, the path forward on trade. Now, Melissa, remember, this does come as the president has said in the past that he'd be willing to talk with companies about tariffs. That's, of course, as negotiations with foreign countries are ongoing as well. The president in the past had said he might not be so rigid when he talks to companies, suggesting there that maybe there was some discussion about exclusions or exemptions.
Just days ago, the CEOs of Walmart, Target, and Home Depot stepped into a private White House meeting. Their message? According to sources close to the meeting, these retail titans told Donald Trump that his aggressive tariff strategy could devastate U.S. supply chains.
Just in the last few moments, the BBC has confirmed that U.S. tariffs against China add up to 145%. That is including the existing 20% tariffs that were already imposed on the country at the beginning of the year, and also after yesterday's huge rally on Wall Street, today we are seeing a very different picture. Share prices falling on the U.S. stock exchange as uncertainty continues over the U.S. trade policy. The Dow is down 3.4%, the S&P 500 down 4.2%, and the Nasdaq is down 5%. Trading, however, in Europe and Asia, though, saw prices surge. So let's talk to our correspondents in Washington and in New York. Jake Kwon joins us first. And Jake, we've got this clarification from the White House as to the tariffs that China faced. Just talk us through what we're learning, because initially we'd thought that China was on 125% tariff, already eye-watering, but we've had some kind of clarity now.
Yes, I mean, this 145% is the clarification from the White House today. The BBC finally has that number now, but there was a bit of a confusion earlier because, yes, as you say, Mr. Trump had tweeted earlier, put it on his Truth Social earlier, that the tariff rate on China will be 125%. So now the White House has clarified that, yes, there is the existing 20% that Mr. Trump has slapped on China due to what he accuses China of is letting fentanyl flow to the U.S.
Trump has slapped a massive 145% tariff on Chinese imports and added 10% duties on goods from most other countries. That's not just political posturing. That's a financial torpedo aimed right at the global flow of goods.
President Trump continues to defend his sweeping tariffs on foreign goods, but Tuesday he said 145% import taxes on some Chinese products would, quote, come down substantially. Earlier Wednesday, CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez asked Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt about trade with China.
What have these huge tariffs on China accomplished?
Leverage and ensuring the rest of the world knows that the United States of America is no longer going to be ripped off. President Trump has made that very clear, not just with China, but with almost every single country on the planet.
But has that leverage actually worked? Because China hasn't made any concessions at all.
Have some patience and you will see.
Have some patience and you will see. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro joins us now. So while the administration says have some patience, we're learning the heads of Walmart and Target warned President Trump about what his tariffs will mean for their stores. What did they say? Did it have an impact?
Why does that matter? Because America's biggest retailers rely heavily on global supply chains. Walmart and Target warned that these tariffs could lead to empty shelves within weeks, not months, weeks.
What we've learned here at CBS News is that these CEOs of Walmart, Target privately warned President Trump in the meeting earlier this week that his tariff policy could impact their supply chains and potentially trickle down to the consumers with a shortage of certain goods and potentially empty shelves. Now, this price increase for consumers is something that CEOs of Target have talked about publicly in interviews, but it's of course notable they're bringing their concerns directly to the president. Now, the White House and the president battle back against any assertion that they are softening their approach to tariffs. But if you just look at what they've been doing, you saw Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent say that the relationship between the U.S. and China is unsustainable right now. He talked about de-escalating, and President Trump has talked about in recent days of lowering that tariff depending on cooperation with China. And we just heard in an Oval Office meeting where President Trump signed some executive orders that when asked, when could these tariffs be lowered on China?
Walmart issued a statement right after the meeting, calling it productive. We had a productive meeting with President Trump and his team and appreciated the opportunity to share our insights, Walmart said in a statement. That's corporate code for, we just told the president we're about to hit a wall.
I'm trying to figure out what slows things down on Walmart. Is it the only thing that could slow it down is the economy?
I even think then we're somewhat insulated because when the economy gets more challenging for consumers, they come to us for value. And we're the company that provides everyday low prices. But what's different now, we've talked about this in the past, we're also known for convenience. So I think we're a company that wins in any type of economic environment. And I really don't see an end to this. So our business model is changing. What we're doing now is growing in these digital channels that is unlocking new revenue streams for us. Things like advertising, fulfillment services, data monetization, all which have higher margins. And so you've got this core retail business that is growing at, call it GDP, low margin, but all these other businesses that are growing at 20 to 30 to 40% a year that are much higher margin than that, the margins in our business want to go up.
Target, in a similar statement, said, "We had a productive meeting with President Trump and our retail peers to discuss the path forward on trade, and we remain committed to delivering value for American consumers." The two retailers have publicly warned that Mr. Trump's tariffs could lead to higher prices. Weeks after Mr. Trump's election win, Walmart CFO John David Rainey told CNBC, "We never want to raise prices, but there probably will be cases where prices will go up for consumers."
According to Donald Trump, tariffs are great, and I also want our country to be rich without any negative consequences. So let's see how he's imposed tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and let's sit back and let's watch that economy roar, baby.
Tonight, the stock market dropping more than 600 points.
U.S. stock markets plunged for the second day in a row.
We've seen consumer confidence tank.
Layoff numbers across the U.S. are the highest they've been since 2020.
The R word is back, thanks in large part to tariffs.
Wait, the R word is back? Tariffs brought back the R word? So I guess I can say it.
Wall Street banks are starting to raise a red flag that recession odds have become unsettlingly high.
Right, that R word. Of course, that's what I was thinking. I can be such a recession sometimes.
Layoffs, hiring freezes, store closures, and panic in retail towns across America.
So what did your team do to prepare for this potential eventuality? I mean, there were a lot of people who still didn't think this was going to happen. Midnight has come, and they are in place as far as we know at the moment.
We've done a lot of scenario planning, and we've tried to understand what are the different options that we might have to face. We'll go back and understand the implication of Canada and Mexico. We've been looking at that. We know for certain categories, like fruits and vegetables, where during this winter season, we depend on Mexico for a significant amount of supply. Those are categories where we'll try to protect pricing, but the consumer will likely see price increases over the next couple of days.
Over the next couple of days, so those go in
really
instantaneously?
short supply chains. You think about all the fresh produce.
Yeah.
We depend on Mexico during the winter. We're going to try to make sure we can do everything we can to protect pricing. But if there's a 25% tariff, those prices will go up.
For things like what? Strawberries, avocados, bananas? What are we talking about?
You've got that list right.
Is that so?
Those are some of the key items.
And those prices could change within days in the stores?
Change, certainly over the next week.
Target's CEO, Brian Cornell, wasn't shy either. He told CNBC that consumers should expect price hikes over the next couple of days, especially from tariffs on Mexican imports. Why? Because Target depends on Mexican produce during winter. That's not just bananas and tomatoes, that's a chunk of their grocery section wiped out.
As across-the-board tariffs on the rest of the world take hold,
The United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations.
the costs of the ingredients and the packaging of some of your favorite supermarket products are likely to lead to higher prices. One strategy consumers are using to get around soaring costs: bagging top-quality brands and going for quality value instead.
I have had this item. Their cottage cheese is the best cottage cheese in my opinion.
A new report from Nielsen IQ reveals private label sales grew globally by 4.3% last year, with more than half of the survey respondents saying they're more likely to buy generic products than ever before. A big reason, those private labels are 26% cheaper on average than their name brand alternatives. But consumers also believe they're good products.
That stigma around private labels being solely a cheaper option, a value option, is kind of eroding.
Retailers are noticing and capitalizing on the trend.
If you guys are not looking for that Good and Gather brand, I'm telling you, they have some good stuff.
And here's the kicker. While Trump hopes to boost U.S. manufacturing with these tariffs, the retail leaders are saying the exact opposite is happening.
The U.S. Chamber of Commerce said in a statement today that they welcome the China tariff agreement, but point out this. Tariffs are much higher overall than they were at the beginning of the year, and many businesses, especially small businesses, are dealing with growing costs and disruptions. I want to bring in NBC's Jacob Soboroff, who is live at the port of Long Beach in California. Jacob, it is one of the busiest ports. Tell us, what are you seeing? What do we need to know?
Not a whole lot, Steph. Unfortunately for people here at the Port of Long Beach and Los Angeles, the busiest port complex in the United States of America, responsible for a significant amount of the economic engine of our entire country. You would think that on this day of this trade announcement and tariff announcement, there would be jubilation here, but I spent much of the day with the CEO of the port, Mario Cordero, who I know you've spoken with as well, with Congressman Robert Garcia, who used to be the mayor here in Long Beach and knows this place inside and out, could close his eyes and tell you how many cranes are behind me, what's happening at the Long Beach container terminal right behind me. We were out on a boat in the harbor. You're looking at some of that right now. There was only one ship at one of the busiest incoming terminals from China today. Another one eventually came in. But what they're saying to me here is uncertainty is the name of the game at this point.
Tariffs raise input costs. That means retailers either eat the cost or pass it to consumers. And in many cases, they can't do either. So they cut jobs instead. Trump did address the tariff backlash, saying the 145% China tariffs might come down substantially, but it won't be zero. That's not much comfort for retailers trying to plan for the holidays.
145% is very high, and it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high. It got up to that. We were talking about fentanyl, where various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high. It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. It used to be zero. We were just destroyed. China was taking us for a ride, and just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're going to be very good to China, have a great relationship with President Xi, but they would make billions and billions and billions of dollars a year, and they would build their military out of the United States and what they made, so that won't happen. But they're going to do very well, and I think they're going to be happy, and I think we're going to live together very happily and ideally work together. So I think it's going to work out very well. But no, it's at 145%. It will not be anywhere near that number.
And remember, this isn't just about China. Earlier this month, the Trump administration threatened reciprocal tariffs on dozens of U.S. trading partners. Most were paused for 90 days, but that clock is ticking.
President Trump now says he will implement a 90-day pause on tariffs on imports from more than 75 countries, but notably not for China. The president also saying that he will raise the tariff on Chinese imports now up to 125%. The market's already reacting positively to the news, with the Dow surging more than 2,000 points and climbing.
Yeah, Tom, it's an extraordinary bit of governing by social media posts. Less than a day after these tariffs, global in nature, went into effect on trading partners around the world, the president says he is pausing or substantially reducing most of them. A 90-day pause. His language is unclear, but it suggests that for most countries, the 75 or so who've either reached out to him or not retaliated against the United States since his tariff order will see their tariffs either paused for 90 days or reduced to that 10% flat rate for that time. In the same post, he says that he is substantially raising the tariff rate on goods from China to 125%.
What happens when the pause ends? Retail CEOs are already bracing for impact. And they're not just warning about prices, they're forecasting supply chain breakdowns.
Well, yes, we're talking about everything from parts to food to medical supplies, even all the construction in our area. The restrictions have already stressed the system.
Merlino Foods has been in business for decades, and Jeff Beasold can never remember a situation like this.
Your company's been in business for how many years?
We've been around since 1900.
The Seattle food distributor says their supply chain has been choked by the sudden closure of some of their longtime restaurant customers. Orders down by double-digit percentage points.
We had already throttled it back last week on incoming product, but basically on Sunday night we completely hit the brakes. Monday morning we canceled every PO that we had in the system.
There is some concern what further shelter-in-place type restrictions could bring to the region, one that has been booming with industry and construction, major redevelopment too. In Los Angeles, there are questions tonight about whether a stay-at-home mandate will halt the building of a new football stadium.
We saw this during COVID. Delayed shipments, empty shelves, customer rage. Now imagine that again, only this time it's not a virus. It's U.S. trade policy. The Trump administration is reportedly considering forming a special working group to manage these supply chain risks. That's a clear sign even they know how serious this could get.
You saw Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick say it really depends on them. And you heard President Trump make a little bit of news when asked if there are talks happening with China. And he said, quote, "Of course, they are happening every day." Now, the White House has not confirmed that before, if there were direct talks happening between the two big global markets. So that's certainly some news there.
But for many retail workers, it might already be too late.
Is President Trump on defense over the plunging and volatile economy? This story keeps kicking. America's largest companies are down, all of them, in the market since the Trump tariff war began. It's a swift toll that we've seen first on Wall Street, trillions wiped out in days. But it is heading for Main Street, and I'm going to show you why tonight, because we're seeing new indications from big box stores to malls, and we know it's coming for Main Street for a few reasons. I always try to give you the evidence, show you why we know what we think we know, and here it is. First, there's detailed data on the inventories and supply chains. So it shows when American stores will be running out of these products, many of which have some foreign ingredient in them, and they're running out of what was purchased before the tariff war began. Second, some of America's largest companies track all of this because it's their whole business and expertise. This is what they do, so they're all over it.
As these companies brace for slower growth and shrinking inventories, layoffs could sweep across the industry. Store clerks, warehouse workers, logistics staff, no one is safe if the supply chain grinds to a halt. But just when it looked like the slowdown would break the system, something flipped. In early May, shipping data from the port of Los Angeles, America's main gateway for goods from China, started to rebound. Ships were back, containers were moving. The slowdown had reversed.
We helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And they did it for a lot of reasons. But trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade with Pakistan. We're going to do a lot of trade with India.
According to Bloomberg's chief U.S. economist, Anna Wong, this wasn't a coincidence. She directly tied the rebound to that April 24th meeting, the one where Walmart, Target, and Home Depot privately told the White House, if you don't act, shelves will go empty. And guess what? Just days later, shipping orders from China surged again. Wong even predicted that if this pace held, tariffs might get rolled back by May 20th. And like clockwork, Trump struck a 90-day trade deal with China, easing the most painful tariffs.
We achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the larger structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that.
It was a sign. Washington heard the warning loud and clear. They blinked because the stakes were bigger than just retail profits. It was about politics, inflation, and keeping Americans calm heading into summer.
Why the trade war ever started to begin with.
Yeah, we've seen the president step back from what he said was needed and necessary to bring manufacturing back to the United States and remake global trade. And it was something that obviously the consensus on Wall Street was that it was a bad idea, the trade policy. And so you had seen the fits and starts on Wall Street for 6 weeks now. Now you've got the Dow back where it was before Liberation Day in the Rose Garden.
Which is good if you are looking at your 401k today.
That journey has been something, but you do have the Chamber of Commerce, for example, saying while we are so glad the president stepped back from the worst of these tariffs, they said we still think that there should be provisions for different industries to opt out so they don't lose jobs, and reminding people this is still much higher tariff levels than the U.S. is used to.
How do you plan for this 90-day pause if you are a business that manufactures overseas and you need to figure out what sort of stock you need for the holiday season and what price you should be putting on it?
Retail stocks had been getting crushed. From January to April, the entire S&P consumer discretionary sector, that's your retail heartbeat, fell over 22%. Investors were fleeing. Sentiment was crumbling.
The Trump tariffs, will that make these in-house brands more expensive too?
Yeah, the private labels are just as subject to the tariffs as the big name brands. So one example is that if a company, for example, imports avocados from Mexico to make packaged guacamole, well, yeah, the private brand that makes it would just get as expensive as the name brand itself. And I want to remind everyone that there are also those steel and aluminum tariffs, which would make packaging, right, cans and also any sort of other types of canisters more expensive as well. So it could be across the board. Although, again, generally speaking, those private label brands tend to be over 20% cheaper than the name.
Now they're clawing back, but unevenly. Walmart's doing well. Its e-commerce game and subscription perks helped it not only recover, but move into positive territory for the year. Their Q4 earnings showed they were ready for volatility. Target, they're still in trouble. Their stock is down in 2025. Q1 earnings dropped sharply, and they blamed it on, you guessed it, tight margins and lower demand. And Home Depot, they're down nearly 29% this year. Not just because of trade pressure, but because people are spending less on homes and renovations. The housing slowdown is hitting them hard, and it's not letting up.
Because this report of big box store CEOs saying these tariffs could essentially empty their shelves. Do you agree with that? And if so, can you explain how that could possibly happen?
Well, I think as we've heard a lot of, presidents of companies that could be impacted by the tariffs, we've heard them describe this as a really dynamic situation because in my opinion, there's two things going on, right? They're worried about their actual inventory, the tariffs impacting the prices of the goods they're selling to all of us. And then secondarily, I think they're worried about consumer confidence, right? Are the people that would come into the big box stores, whether it's electronics or maybe personal goods, shampoos and conditioners, are people starting to pull back on those purchases? So, you're worried both consumer confidence, like do people feel like they have enough money to buy things? And then are there things for them to buy and are those things much more expensive? And I do believe, the people running these companies, because I think it's been a pretty challenging time to navigate, what's going on in the news. As you mentioned, there's all this talk about tariffs and it feels like it can change day by day and sometimes like today, even within a day.
So even though the supply chain is breathing for now, the threat still lingers. That 90-day pause isn't a solution. It's a delay. And if tariffs snap back into place in July, retailers may not get a second lifeline. This isn't just a retail issue. It's a jobs issue, a community issue. When giants like Walmart, Target, and Home Depot get squeezed, the ripple effects hit every small town in America.
Over canaries in coal mines, because in terms of flashing red indicators, nothing beats what is happening at America's largest port right now, as in this afternoon. Thanks to Donald Trump's tariffs, a radical act of economic and political self-sabotage, America's harbors are very suddenly much quieter, lonelier places. Take the Port of LA, which has been, since the turn of the century, the busiest port in the Western Hemisphere. Its directors say a fifth of normally scheduled vessel arrivals for this month have been canceled, and cargo coming in is about 35% lower now than it was the same time last year.
So here's the real question. Who's really pulling the strings in American retail right now? It's not the shoppers, not the workers, not even the government anymore. It's the CEOs, and they just fired a warning shot loud enough to shake the White House. Because when Walmart, Target, and Home Depot say jump, Washington doesn't ask why, it asks how high. But that power comes with a price, and we're about to pay it. Mass layoffs, higher prices, fragile supply chains, and a trade war that's one bad tweet away from turning summer into chaos. This wasn't just a private meeting with the president. This was a shot across the bow, a signal that the biggest players in U.S. retail are preparing for something much bigger than tariffs. In the end, this isn't just about one policy or one president. It's about what happens when corporate America and the government collide behind closed doors, and the rest of us are left to deal with the fallout. And the question is, can the U.S. retail industry survive its own giants? Or did Walmart, Target, and Home Depot just set off a chain reaction that crushes it from the inside out?